You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cricket Podcast. We are here to, celebrate and commiserate India beating Pakistan. And it wasn't just a beat, was it? It was an absolute demolition from Rohit and his merry band of brilliant bowlers. I'm today joined by Ashwin from Edges and Sledges. How you doing, Ashwin?
I'm doing great. I'm not sure why you said commiserate. I'm mostly here to celebrate. You brought an Indian cricket podcaster on your show. Of course, we're going to celebrate today. So.
I'm going to be the commiseration part. So we've got a little bit of balance, right, and a little bit of poking fun at some Pakistan players. I am Ross Legg. I'm not joined by Max and Jack today. They're off doing other things on a Saturday, which is disgraceful, really. But you are going to be stuck with me for the next kind of half an hour or so. We are going to talk through what a brilliant performance was from Rohit Sharma with the bat, Bumrah's delivery to Mohammad Rizwan. We'll probably spend about 5 hours talking about how brilliant that was, if I'm perfectly honest. And yeah, just the pendulum swing that is Pakistan's performance in World Cup cricket. But before we do, we are sponsored by Manscaped. So if you want to have some lovely smooth balls for the winter, then you should go to their website, put in code CricketPod for 20% off and free shipping. Ashwin, where should we start? My view here, we do a bit of chronological order and we kind of just work our way through, if that's okay.
Brilliant. Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. I was thinking through the fact that Pakistan was one of the 4 undefeated teams going into this game, and obviously that had to change because India and Pakistan were both out there. But yeah, we're down to 3 teams that have yet to lose a game so far, so it's pretty exciting in the World Cup as a whole.
It is, right? And I think going into this as well, this was Pakistan had just chased down a record score. Granted, it was against Sri Lanka, who probably got the worst bowling lineup in the tournament. But the pendulum swing, as I mentioned, was really quite significant here. And I actually thought that Rohit Sharma winning the toss, sticking them into bat, good decision from Rohit to put pressure on this Pakistan lineup, who kind of, I don't know, they've got their own little trademarked way of chasing games. And I kind of thought immediately it kind of took the sting out of a potential kind of banana skin for India. And Pakistan didn't start too badly, really. If you were in Pakistan's shoes after 10 overs, actually you're kind of sitting there going, do you know what? This isn't going too bad. And when you then have Babar Azam and Rizwan at the crease, when it's 150 for 2, you're kind of sitting there going, hang on a minute, This game is in the balance, right? What were you feeling when Babar and Rizwan were at the crease?
Yeah, it was very interesting because it's a little bit of both, right? You both have the belief that you're 150 for 2. I think that was 27, 28 overs. Old school ODI rule of thumb is you want to double your score after 30. So you're thinking 320, 330. But you knew India had managed bowling resources well. B, the run rate was starting to trend downwards even before the 3rd wicket and beyond fell. It was starting to trend a little downwards. So the bowlers had done a nice job, strangling them for lack of a better word. And you just felt like the middle overs are where ODIs turn. And to be honest, that's why they've been so uneventful for many folks for so long, right? Test cricket is doing so well, T20s are doing so well, and it's that over 15 through 40 in ODIs that is the dull period. And I said this for India's first match against Australia, and I said India won it eventually despite being 2 for 3 because we played boring cricket. And I think it was Pakistan's opportunity to play boring cricket at 152 for 2, and I think they had their sights set on 320, 330 plus, and obviously as a result ended up with just the 191. So.
And what I find interesting about that, at the start, people would have said, this is a road. They've put out a road at Ahmedabad. And it was kind of a little bit low and slow on the black soil that was kind of being used. I didn't quite see it as a 320, 330 pitch. I thought that kind of if you get to 280, then actually go on India, see what you can do on this. And I thought this was almost perfectly poised for Pakistan. I thought like Babar Azam and Mohammad Rizwan being in that position, they do it all the time together. Right, and I thought this was a really big opportunity for them to kind of go, do you know what, let's take them down. But you had 130,000 people in the stadium, all India fans. Let's be fair. There's no. I'd be very surprised if a Pakistan fan had kind of creeped in.
Even if there was, they were probably in disguise because it was not going to be an easy time to be a Pakistan.
They're actually dressed as a chair. Perfect. But obviously, we try and be a balanced cricket show, and we have highlighted before that the visa situation that kind of India have kind of put the blockers up for Pakistan throughout this has been nothing short of kind of disgraceful in that space. But we can park that for now. It's 130,000 India fans all screaming, and yet they're literally getting exactly what they wanted, right? They were just like, this is where Pakistan are. We've got Virat, we've got Rohit, we've got Bumrah coming in, and then all of a sudden the wheels start coming off, and you see, I don't know, it's almost like the pressure got to them, and all of the previews I had a big thing around which team is going to have the biggest bottle here, and who's going to have. I think in England we call it, do you have the minerals to do it? Do you have the courage to kind of stand up and do this, right? Kind of lock, stock, or snatch, if you like those films. And here Pakistan were lacking, and they collapsed in spectacular fashion. Where do you think that came from? Was it a case of India being brilliant at bowling because we saw a couple of good deliveries, or was this a case of the occasion getting to some of the Pakistan players?
I think the sort of the cheap answer, if you will, is it was a little bit of both, right? I do think the Indian bowlers really did show up, at least the 5 of them who got to bowl. Obviously, there was a number 8 who who bowled 2 overs, which is a discussion for maybe later. But I think it was a little bit of both. I do think the occasion got to them, and I do think, like I said, I think so much of batting first in an ODI is about assessing the total. And exactly as you said, it looked like, and maybe the start they got off to sent them on the wrong track, but they were sitting there at anybody 152 for 2 in 28 overs with Babar, with Rizwan at the crease, you're thinking we can get 300. And I think that thought process just made them go for shots that they wouldn't have normally gone for. And then you have to balance it out. Bumrah bowled a couple of magnificent deliveries. Gosh, Kuldeep picked up 2, but I don't know if you got to see. He had 2 very, very unlucky DRS decisions go against him as well. But then at the same time, you had, I think it was Iftikhar get bowled around the legs by Kuldeep by dragging it on, which is just an unacceptable way to bat. Even the tail, just an unacceptable way to bat. You have to at least try to play out your 50 overs in an ODI, right? So even when they're at 171 for 7 and 35, just grind it out and give a couple of your number 10, number 11 guys the chance to hit some over the boundary. So that's what I think they just missed out on.
I think that's fair. Let's talk about the dismissals, because I think the LBW up front for Siraj had started a little bit expensive, came back, cross seam, and actually the ball didn't get up too much, and the guy was plumb in front, right? It's Shafiq. I thought Imal or Haq chased one that he probably didn't need to chase at that point in the game, and it battled quite a lot. It played 38 deliveries, and it was just a little bit just like, you're there as an opening batsman, you've lost your partner, you're in not in a rebuild period, but you are in that critical period where you have to make that count. And I thought it was a little bit reckless from the opener.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Imam has such an impeccable record against India, and he was batting so fluidly. I think he was at about a run a ball at that point. And at that point, you think you're a little bit invincible almost. And I think he just went for it. And yeah, I mean, even on Siraj, like you mentioned, it is not atypical for him to be a little expensive, but that's what makes him the bowler he is. He bowls with so much heart. He never gives up, and you always feel like there's a wicket right around the corner. And today it happened to be Shafiq, who was batting outstandingly until then as well. And
well, the wicket just being around the corner, Babar Azam just got to 50. And then just a momentary lapse in concentration. He pretty much left a straight one. Is the way in which I was looking at it. It was a complete nothing shot. And you've got is he first in the ODI rankings at the moment, batting wise? It battled back after 2 really poor performances with the bat in the previous 2 games. Here, the game was on his shoulders, right? And it was, that was a monumental miscalculation.
Yeah, a nothing shot is the only way to describe it. It's disappointing. You want him to be doing well. I'm an India fan. We're an Indian cricket podcast, so I of course was happy at the dismissal. But you just don't want to see that from the top players in the game at the peak of their game. And he obviously didn't have a good first couple of games in the tournament either. So you hope for the sake of him and for Pakistan cricket, they're so over reliant on their number 3. Call it their top 4, but. Yeah, just disappointing. There's not a lot to say, because you look at some of the other dismissals and they were absolutely brilliant deliveries, and not a lot the batters could have done. But Babar, you feel like he should, and Imam, you feel like they should have done better.
Agreed. And they're the seniors, right? They're the kind of, well, maybe not as senior as Iftikhar are, but we'll come into that. And then Bumrah decides to turn up. And the Bumrah that I don't know, India have always been kind of waiting for. I think he's been kind of getting himself back into fitness. I think he's bowled reasonably well in the opening couple of games. I think is he now the leading wicket taker? I think maybe he's like or near or thereabouts.
Probably.
But he's been good, but he's not had to be kind of unbelievably good.
And actually, yet, the Kiwis, now that you mentioned it, have 2. They have Santner and Matt Henry, both of who picked up 8. So they're a little bit ahead of us. Bumrah's got 6 now.
But Bumrah is, I don't know, when he turns it on like that, he bowls 90 miles an hour. He can bowl nearly any variation kind of in the setup for a right arm pace bowler, and seems to be able to land it on a dime. Right, it is, he's a cheat code is kind of the language I see all the time on Twitter. The ball to bowl Rizwan, that if that was uploaded to Pornhub, I wouldn't be surprised. Right, it was absolutely filthy. Yeah. And like, what could you do in that situation? We kind of talked about Babar's nothing shot. Here, Rizwan has tried to get down, tried to play the line, and the ball's like he's pretty much turned. He's bowled an off cutter, and it has turned and nipped back and taken the stumps. It was a beautiful delivery, wasn't it?
I mean, when I don't know what are you a quick bowler? I know you guys play a lot of Sunday.
I'm an opening batsman, so I've been on the receiving end of much worse deliveries than that. Got myself out. So
yeah. So, but I mean, when you're a quick bowler growing up, and I wasn't, but you just know that the Test cricket, they say aim for the top of off stump. Like that's the line to aim, and that's exactly where he hit, and it felt like he could have hit that multiple times over in this match. And I mean, I've said it on our show separately, and I should be good and plug our show for any listeners who want an Indian cricket podcast. We're the Edges and Sledges cricket podcast. You can check us out once a week as well. But I've said on our show many times, I'm running out of hyperbole for Jasprit Bumrah. It's just he's just that good, and this team looks completely different when he's there. I did want to ask you if you had a thought or picked up on anything about Rohit's use of his bowlers and rotation, because as you think about it, he initially started with one spinner relatively early on one end, while Hardik and Siraj were playing the other. Then he brought on both, and then it felt like every time he made a bowling change, they took a wicket. Now maybe when 8 wickets fall in for 30 odd runs, that's going to happen just mathematically, but it felt like he used his bowlers pretty well today.
Mm-hmm. I think he did, and it was that it's almost the embarrassment of riches that they've got. And what I find interesting here is India decided to play with 10 players today. India are an unbelievable side. They've got Ravichandran Ashwin sitting on the bench. They've got Mohammad Shami sitting on the bench. And this ultimately is the biggest game of the World Cup so far, right? For them personally and the occasion, I don't understand what is with the conservative selection of Shardul Thakur. I can sometimes understand it where they're trying to get the right balance, and they do this could all go wrong. But that's old school thinking. You've literally got some of the best bowling arsenal that world cricket has got to offer at this point in time. You've got a venue that is going to be able to support either Shami or Ashwin, I think would have been fair to say today. And then you're having a backup, or you're at number 8 being just like, do you know what? We have Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, Shreyas Iyer, KL Rahul, all these kind of elite level batters can't deal with it. We need to have this contingency. I want India to take the handbrake off and go hell for leather. They could have, I don't know, they've destroyed Pakistan today, but it felt to me as if that is still somebody with one foot out the door rather than both feet into this kind of let's win the World Cup camp. What do you think about that, Ashwin?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with you. I worry that I've said this before many times, but when you're picking your number 8 for batting over bowling, I understand. India's been 15 for 3 before, 5 for 3. Gosh, in the opener of the World Cup, it was 2 for 3, right? Or in India's opener of the World Cup. So I understand how when your top order collapses, you make some choices with some conservatism on the batting, but it just feels like if you're picking your number 8 for their slight batting, and to be clear, Shardul's not an outstanding batter. He can bat a little bit, and I'll get some heat for saying this because he's done well in Test cricket with the bat and that. But I don't think he's necessarily better than Ashwin. I definitely don't think he's a better bowler than either Ashwin or Shami. And so I hope they figure it out. I fully expect Ashwin to come back in on wickets that'll turn more. I think India plays a couple of matches at seaming wickets, and I think they're going to continue to back him, and that's frustrating. I think the other piece of it is he's a confidence player, right? When the captain's backing him, when he's getting selected, when he's getting time, when he's getting overs, he does well. What signal are you sending him now, saying, "Hey, we picked you, but we're not going to give you more than 2 overs, and everybody else is going to get a chance to play"? It's not going to help him, and so that's what I'm fully with you on is a little frustrating.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But like the rest of this India lineup, they are phenomenal, and I think we've kind of talked around. There's not too many weaknesses at all in this, and I think they've got even though the 15-man squad is limited, I think it should be 16, 17 people. I don't understand why it's 15 people, but they've got an embarrassment of riches, right, where they can pick and choose, and as you say, depending on what venues they end up playing at, they can pick an even stronger 11. And I just think that in a game like this, let's not worry about the contingency. Your big players are always going to step up. And the difficult for me now is every single time I get told that India versus Pakistan is the biggest game in world cricket, it's such a massive rivalry in the sporting arena. It doesn't feel like a rivalry to me, Ashwin. It is very, very one-sided these days. And it's, I don't know, just sometimes that spectacle just gets lost. I think as a neutral in that, I can imagine if you're an Indian fan or a Pakistan fan, you're just like, no, Ross, you're talking crazy. But as a neutral, it's not an even contest. It feels like. So
yeah, I mean, I think most rivalries over the course of time have been through phases. There's been a phase where Pakistan was a lot better than India was. I don't like to think about those, probably late 80s, early 90s to an extent. And probably the last decade or so, India's been a much more dominant force in cricket. I don't think it changes the nature of the rivalry, the passion the fans feel, etc. But you're right. I think you could almost argue many games. I can't think of a single one so far. I think we were 12 or 13 out of 45 group games, and nothing has really been that close. Yeah. And so that's probably a more of an existential debate about ODI cricket in general and what role. And to be clear, it's not because all the tracks have been flat and everything's been 300 plus. There have been some low scorers, and there just haven't been that many close games in general. So I don't know if I think about it as a function of India-Pakistan as a rivalry as much, because it's still a great rivalry. But yeah, you do want some of the matches to be a little closer at some point.
Mm-hmm. But all is not lost, right? When it comes to this game, I think there was some bits where we can just stand up and watch class, right? And that is Rohit Sharma at the crease. I think if we talk around the rest of Pakistan's batting, it was pathetic. They lost 7 wickets for 35 runs or something, and it was meek, is how I'd end up talking about it. And you talk about how Rohit managed his bowling lineup. Every single bowling change he did, it kind of came off, right? Jadeja would come back in, get a wicket. Kuldeep would come on, he'd get a wicket. Hardik Pandya kind of in that space. I talked about cheat code earlier. Having Hardik Pandya just as your kind of other bowler in this lineup is just amazing. And again, all performed really, really well. But Pakistan, really, really let themselves down. And Riker, you in the chat is saying, oh, no. Can you cheer me up? I support Pakistan. It's just like, on days like today, the only way I can cheer you up is to say, look, this is game 3 of the World Cup. You've got another 6 games in the group stage. You're sitting pretty compared to some of the other teams, and Pakistan have got that time to figure it out. Ashwin, I'm not sure what you think about this, but the depth in Pakistan's kind of middle order today, it got exposed, I think, a little bit today. Where is the professor? Where's Mohammed Hafiz? Where's Shoaib Malik? I know they're kind of where's the kind of next person in that space who can actually stand up and take a bit of responsibility.
Yeah, and there's a couple of key things there, right? One, the middle order just didn't show up at all today. They're better, I think, on paper than today sort of suggested, right? If you will. I mean, Saud Shakil is an outstanding talent. I think Shadab Khan is actually a good lower order bat who just hasn't found any form either with bat or ball. And so it's been disappointing. I do hope Pakistan find some of the energy. Like you said earlier, there was a great chase against the Sri Lankan team, even against the Netherlands. It looked scary there for a little bit, but the bowlers managed to defend, just 286 or so. I think that against the Dutch, it did look like there was a potential shot for the Dutch to chase it. So anyway, all that to say, the middle order is definitely a gap for Pakistan. There will be games for the rest of this tournament where the Babar, Rizwan, Imam, they all fire, and it doesn't become an issue. And I say this as an Indian fan who's been through the journey of us being basically reliant on the top 3 as recently as 2019 World Cup. You could argue it was Rohit, there was Shikhar, it was Kohli, and then there was just nothing, because those 3 made runs so often that the middle order never had to do much. And when their time came, they weren't ready. We've now gotten more balanced. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's actually talk about Rohit's batting, because he is he's brought up 300 sixes in ODI cricket. Mm-hmm. If you were creating an all-time World 11 in ODI cricket, he's the first name on the team sheet, I think, in terms of that.
That's a big claim. Yeah.
Well, I think if you look at his record, it is phenomenal, right? The Hitman is one of those people who I don't know who else you'd have as your kind of number one in that team. And today,
he was 14 runs away from his 8th World Cup century. I
think
mean,
of that.
it's just.
And he didn't even get picked for the 2011 one, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's the tweets are doing the rounds about the fact that he, was disappointed he didn't get picked, which is unbelievable. So,
and you saw that today with one, had a really good time with the captaincy, but two, with the batting, he looked like he had more time than everyone else. But before the tournament, I'm happy to put it on record here and kind of remind everyone, I was questioning whether, are we going to see the Rohit that we know and love in ODI cricket, or are we going to start to see the one that we're starting to see in IPL? And in the IPL, is kind of over the hill a little bit in terms of T20 cricket. ODI cricket, though, today he was, no one could put a glove on him until he got out, right? And everything seemed elegant and effortless. And when you look like that on TV, that's some skill.
Yeah, I mean the same against the Afghanistan bowling lineup, which is a pretty strong bowling lineup, actually, to be clear. They're not a bad bowling lineup, and he just made it look so effortless. And I think both Gill and Rohit actually are the guys who look like they always have that extra split second. And so when they're on their game, it's just absolutely astonishing to watch. I think, I don't remember when it was, probably 6 or 7 years ago, the question came up on, like, who is India's biggest six hitter? And you talk about the Hardiks, or you talk about some of the lower order players, and the reality is it is unequivocally Rohit Sharma. And when he hits, he's just, and the numbers showed, obviously. And I'm with you. I think there's a big difference between ODIs and T20s, and he has not quite been the force in T20s that we thought he's capable of, at least recently. But he is undoubtedly an ODI great, and has, also cemented basically his spot as India's test opener now too, right? So it's been fascinating to see the journey, and we just selfishly hope he's not peaking too early in what's a long tournament.
Yeah, and sometimes I think I've listened to some of the other podcasts and some of the other kind of cricket commentary, and they talk about, when are we going to peak? When is the start, right? And sometimes teams are just better than everybody else. Sometimes you look at some of the Australian teams that have then gone on to win the World Cup. They just steamrolled through. India have that opportunity to do that right here, right? They're 3 from 3. Like, it will not be a surprise to anybody, I don't think, if they go all the way and win every single game in a row. That's not going to be a surprise. And I think the difficulty comes in is the self-doubt and the angst amongst the India fans. And what I really liked today was there was a moment when Rohit and Kohli were batting in the 8th over, and Rohit's knocked it down the ground, and Virat Kohli is just doing what every single one of us has been guilty of in our life: ball watching.
Yeah.
And even the best of the best, right, do it. And there was almost a run out. It was a clear single. There was almost a run out. It was all nothing. On commentary, it was like the world was going to end. They were just like, "What are you doing? God, oh my God, there's so much risk involved. Why would you be so stupid?" Like, at the moment, at that point in time, India were like 80 for 1, chasing 190 odd. Like, there was zero consequence of that. Like, there was no way that India were not going to do it. But that angst is not an unfamiliar piece from doing this podcast amongst kind of India fans. What were you feeling in that moment? Were you just like, oh, do you know what, it's a half chance? Or were you in the, oh my God, it could all go wrong with one silly run out and we could collapse? Where were you on that spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, even as late as 150 for 2 or so, my group text that I had with a couple of buddies was like, listen, remember they were also 150 for 2 because Rohit got out, I think, at 156 or something. And I was like, well, they were also 152 for 2. So you can never really, until that winning run is hit, you're just never really letting up, partly because of the fact that, collapses have happened before, partly because of the size and the magnitude of this rivalry. I was more annoyed at that run out than anything, because Kohli was 100% wrong for ball watching, but also there was no run. There was just not a run there. And Rohit had just hit a 6 and wanted to get off strike. And so he hit it and set off regardless of the fact that he hit straight to the fielder. So I was, ultimately, I was just hoping it didn't lead to one of them making a rash decision anytime soon. Kohli did hit an uncharacteristic shot, not super long after that. So it wasn't great. I will say, though, and just to go on a tangent, the big part of belief and confidence in getting over the angst is somebody like what KL Rahul has done at 5, and then today what Shreyas Iyer did at 4. Right? There's still a lot of people out there saying Surya Kumar Yadav should come in. He can, if he walks in after 30 overs, he bats like a T20 and he's a game changer. And that is correct. I think your selection question is, do you pick a number 4-5 batter to bat for when you're 180 for 3, or do you pick him to bat for when you're 15 for 3? And for me, at 15 for 3, I want Shreyas Iyer walking out to just consolidate a little. But that's a tough choice. It's a problem of plenty, as you said.
And I quite like this as a tangent. So I think it might depend on who you're up against. I think if you're against a South Africa, based upon what they've done, or against England, who are kind of both batting with real intent, both really going for it, there might be a need to kind of go, look, we've got some fail safes in terms of kind of Kohli can bat in the way and kind of save games. KL Rahul, I think, is kind of undroppable kind of in this lineup. But if it was to be Shreyas, I was impressed with Shreyas as well today. But there is a question mark around, would they need to add a little bit of firepower into that just as an option, right, in case the game does start to get away from them a little bit? Would that be the scenario you see it in? Or is it more a case of just like, we've got him if we need him, but we're going to stick with this 11 for now?
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to like my answer, but I would not put England and South Africa in the same bucket there. I would say against England, you're spot on. The likelihood is they're going to make 350, 400 on a big day, and you're going to need the firepower to chase it down. I think for me, against South Africa, I mean, between Rabada, Janssen, and Ngidi, you're a higher likelihood of being 15 for 3 than you are against England. Now, when we are 15 for 3 against England, somebody's going to cut this clip and give me a hard time on the internet. But I think you're more thinking about your opening bowlers. And to be clear, Pakistan is a team where we could have well been 15 for 3 on paper. Shaheen and Haris Rauf, and they're outstanding power play bowlers. And so for me, I think you think about it more that way. So I wouldn't maybe pick a Surya Kumar against England where we might need the runs, but I'd pick a Shreyas against South Africa where our top order could get ripped through.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And it just depends how you guys end up dealing with Reece Topley. So we'll see how that ends up going. And then the other part here is that Pakistan, the pendulum did swing, as we talked about at the start, but all is not lost. You're allowed to have a bad game. And I think that sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in the moment of this is what the most watched game in world cricket and probably world sport. And I think, if there's a little bit of respite for some Pakistan fans listening to this, is that it is one game. There's a long tournament still left to go. I do think that India just exposed what was there today, as we talked about in that middle overs. But as you say, they've got the bowling to cause those problems, which I think is a good thing. But their T20 strategy, their ODI strategy, relies on certain people hitting all the runs, and it just, is sometimes going to fall apart. Ashwin, when it comes to the next set of games, so I think India, Pakistan, I think it's done. It's been a demolition job. Rohit Sharma did a fantastic job with the bat. Bumrah and the guys did a great job with the ball. And Pakistan, I think I wrote on Twitter, pissed their pants, which is a little bit on the big stage. England play tomorrow. Where do you think that one's going to go? Because it should be an easy win against Afghanistan, but nothing is easy when it comes to World Cup cricket.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think England will still take it. It's at Delhi, which has been high scoring. Now it depends on what pitch gets rolled out, but I think England's batters should have no time winning it. And I specifically called that out because Afghanistan has a pretty solid bowling lineup, but I feel like their batting has just not been able to close out games for them. So for me, England should take that one. And if they don't, there's a much if they don't, I'll be tuning into your episode because I want to know, because there's a much bigger concern. If you can't beat Afghanistan at Delhi in a long World Cup, it's going to be very hard to see line of sight to the semifinals.
Yeah, and Fawad in the chat is kind of saying that tomorrow's match, I want England to score 400. And genuinely, if we bat first, that is not out of the question. But I also think what you're saying there, Ashwin, is that they do have some bowling to cause a little bit of trouble. But again, is that going to actually happen on that Delhi pitch? Not so sure. If you're playing at the Cheapawk, maybe you're going to run into a bit of problem. But I think this England lineup has, stuttered in the first game. People kind of doing what people are doing now on the Pakistan performance, saying rip it all up, start again, and all this kind of stuff. But we roared back in the next game. England, should overcome them with, relative ease would be kind of my prediction. Who do you have finishing up? So now we're 3 games in. Who do you have kind of making that top 4?
So my original top 4 was India, England, South Africa, New Zealand, and I'm not actually changing that. I think I said that. Yeah, I think that was what I said. Now, of course, I might have selective memory. I may have put Australia in there because of their 5-time champions. But so I think that's still your best bet. I think England obviously lost to New Zealand, but that was always going to be a tough first match, right? I mean, there's going to be the head-to-heads between these four teams. So somebody's going to lose. So I think South Africa was probably the surprise pick for a lot of people. And 3 matches in, you see, or I guess they've only played 2, but you see why. Massive victories in both cases, and you see why South Africa is going to be up there. So that's my 4. I'm curious, does yours differ from that?
So I had India, Pakistan, South Africa, and England as 4. So I think New Zealand have started really, really well. And again, it's like that classic case. Like I will forever, and I think I've said this every single World Cup, I will always write off New Zealand and then be pleasantly surprised because they're a really nice team, right? You kind of watch them and just like, God, these guys can play cricket, and there's only like 15 of them who live on the whole country, and you're just like, it's amazing how they continue to do it. Kane Williamson's got a fractured thumb. Have you seen this? The most unlucky man in 2023.
Yeah, did you see the picture? The size of it, it was not great, but yeah.
No, and you can only feel for Kane Williamson, right? Like literally is desperate to get that World Cup after the 2019 defeat to England, and like all of the stuff that he's done to come back from the ACL injury.
The 2019 tie to England, I mean, right?
Well, who's got the trophy?
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying the match was a tie. Anyway.
But you kind of sit there and I just feel sorry for Kane Williamson. Like he might not be the elite T20 player that we kind of get told that he is, but in ODI cricket and what he's done for New Zealand is spectacular. And him being out probably until it's a fractured thumb. How long does that take to heal?
I haven't heard the latest. Have they given a time frame? I haven't heard what
no, but he's been replaced by Tom Blundell in the squad, but he's going to stay with the team. So I don't really know. You can name a 15-man squad. If someone kind of gets injured or they're carrying an injury, you can kind of just have whatever you like. It's classic ICC. You don't really. It's a lot of grey when it comes to that. I think it's very fair to say. Right. That's it. But I think when you have that lineup's good. And then in Australia, I said weren't going to make it. So that one I'm feeling pretty confident about. They've obviously played 2 of the more challenging teams.
There's still something for me about never writing off 5-time world champions, and they don't look objectively great on paper, but it takes a couple of Smith and Warner specials, and then I think they're only really lacking with spin. But Maxwell could pick up 3 or 4 wickets one day, and suddenly
he's been out bowling Zampa, isn't he?
Yeah.
And there's been talk of Nathan Lyon being drafted.
I loved that. I really loved that Nathan Lyon himself, I think, quoted that he said, "I called Andrew McDonald, said I'm available if you need me," which would be absolutely amazing to see happen.
Yeah, seeing him in the canary yellow, I would think it would be a good side. But yeah, we talked in the preview saying that they've picked their test team, and actually, like you look at it and just a bit like. They haven't changed enough from their test down. I just think that they missed Travis Head, I think, in that lineup, but that's the way it goes. So thank you ever so much for joining me, Ashwin, on this lovely Saturday. Commiserations to the Pakistan fans listening, and congratulations to India, who do go marching on towards potentially a World Cup win, but there's still a long way to go. There's 6 more games to play in the group stage, and anything could happen. So Ashwin, as I said, thank you and have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
And everybody, if you want to, please go and check out Ashwin's Edges and Sledges podcast. There's a bit of Delhi fandom in that podcast, but
all 3 of us grew up in Delhi. It's hard for us to put that bias aside. I like that you were saying you try to be balanced. I was like, I don't actually know if we try to be that balanced on our show, but we never claim to be. We're 3 guys from Delhi. We're 3 Indian cricket fans, and we love it.
And absolutely lovely fellas at that. So go and check those stuff out. Thank you everybody for listening. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.